We are bringing in restaurants and people and businesses and building multifamily housing. We are putting a lot of people into an area that the infrastructure has not been upgraded to accommodate.
First at 5, a push for change after a woman is killed in a hit and run. The mayor of Beaverton says this particular stretch of road is in desperate need of upgrades. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm David Molko.
And I'm Laurel Porter. Late this afternoon, police announced they located a vehicle of interest in this case. Mike Benner is at the scene with more on the investigation and the mayor's call to action. Mike?
Well, Laurel, good evening. Beaverton Mayor Lacey Beatty wants to see some major changes in this area of Southwest Farmington and Hall. In fact, right now she's working with our congressional delegation to make that happen. This comes as detectives are working to get to the bottom of the hit and run, and it appears that hard work is paying off. Late this afternoon, we learned that police located a vehicle of interest and its driver.
It's very sad. It's very heartbreaking.
A lone vase of flowers sits at the corner of Southwest Hall and Farmington in Beaverton. This is where a woman was hit and killed while crossing the street Tuesday morning.
I'm sure if she had family, it's a very painful thing to go through to lose anyone.
Also devastated by what investigators are classifying as a hit and run is Beaverton Mayor Lacey Beatty.
The first thing that went through my mind was that it could have been my mom.
Mayor Beatty spoke to us from Washington, D.C., where she happens to be working to secure funding to upgrade roads in Beaverton. Among the priorities is an area called The Loop. The southeast corner of that area is where the pedestrian was killed.
We have city-owned roads, county-owned roads, ODOT-controlled highways. We have a rail line, we have a MAX line, so we have a very complex transportation system happening.
Making matters worse, according to the mayor, the sidewalks are unsafe and inconsistent, or as we noticed, non-existent in some places.
We've had a strong push to fix this road before, and now we have an even clearer message that change needs to happen.
A sentiment echoed by people who frequent downtown Beaverton.
It's just not pedestrian friendly. I think cars go really fast.
An observation that carries a little more weight in the wake of that deadly hit and run. A case investigators aren't saying too much about, aside from releasing some photos of a vehicle of interest that has since been located. Detectives adding that the driver is cooperating with authorities.
It's just a sad situation. Hopefully this doesn't happen to anyone else.
All right, it's worth reiterating that red SUV is simply a vehicle of interest right now. It's unclear if it's the vehicle involved in the hit and run. As always, as we get more information, including news of any arrest, we'll be sure to pass it along with the name of the victim when we learn that. Laurel.
It is such a tragic loss. Thank you, Mike. 2022 is on track to be one of the worst years for gun violence in Portland. It's an issue that's becoming the focal point of conversations in local communities. And last night, the pastor of Vancouver Avenue First Baptist organized a Zoom meeting with leaders in law enforcement and criminal justice. Portland's police chief, the FBI, the Justice Department, and the city were all there reflecting on what they're seeing.
It is not uncommon for law enforcement now to find 40, 50, 80, 100 shell casings on the ground. That is an unprecedented level of bullets flying around the street.
You know, you try to reconcile your desires to build trust and to do community engagement. And then you realize, too, you're part of a system that has had bad outcomes for people, particularly people of color.
Portland saw a record 90 homicides in 2021. There have been 20 so far this year.
I see no sense in life if it cannot stop the death. Being the leader of the world means to be the leader of peace.
The leader of peace, a snapshot there of the Ukrainian president's passionate plea to Congress today and directly to President Biden. President Volodymyr Zelensky pushing for more help to halt or even slow that Russian assault. He called for a NATO-enforced no-fly zone over Ukraine, or at the very least, better anti-aircraft equipment. The White House consistently resisting that call for a no-fly zone, fearing further escalation in the conflict there. Instead, President Biden focused today on what the U.S. has done to help, including sending $800 million in new military aid. He also told reporters he believes the Russian president is responsible for war crimes.
This could be a long and difficult battle, but the American people will be steadfast in our support of the people of Ukraine in the face of Putin's immoral, unethical attacks on civilian populations.
NBC's Lester Holt talked exclusively to the Ukrainian president after that address. Zelensky telling Lester, quote, World War III may have already started. That interview just over 20 minutes away on NBC Nightly News. Meanwhile, with cities in Ukraine under siege and the refugee tide surging, a Ukrainian man living in Vancouver is helping his uncle, half a world away, feed people who are in need. Brian Clerkley is here now. And Brian, in this case, it's really about basic needs as simple as bread and soup.
That's right, David. And so far, they've raised over $100,000 for the effort. So let me explain. Ivan Sabovi has lived in Vancouver for 20 years. He came over from Ukraine when he was 11. And because of his fundraiser, his uncle Andriy has been able to pass out thousands of meals to people in Ukraine. Before the war, Andriy worked in a bakery. Now he's using all his supplies to make the food. He lives right outside the capital city of Kyiv. Andriy says most of the businesses are closed and people are really in need. That's why he enlisted his nephew Ivan, who started the online fundraiser. Andriy says he and several volunteers are helping to bake the bread and make the soup, and they are using the money to also build up a large stock of food.
Frontline is 10 kilometers from us, so it's very close. When we're sitting at home, our windows are shaken from explosions. And like 10-15 kilometers from here, some villages are flattened completely.
Andriy says there are more and more refugees coming into his town, so they'll need even more food in the future. And if you would like to donate, we are posting a link to the fundraiser on our website, KGW.com.
Well, I know so many people want to do what they can to help. Thank you, Bryant. The information we're learning every day about the war in Ukraine is difficult for many of us adults to take in. So how do we explain what's happening to our kids? Christine Pitawanich has some tips.
The images we're seeing out of Ukraine are heart-wrenching. Families pulled apart and communities destroyed by war.
Kids, no doubt, hear us talking about it, but it can be hard to find a way to explain it to them in an age-appropriate way. So we got owner and director of Woodward Montessori, Elizabeth Epping, to weigh in.
They hear everything, you know, they even more things that we don't feel like they're hearing, they hear it. And so it's best to, talk about it right away so that they know.
Epping says she explained the situation in a way kids would understand.
I took out the big globe and I showed them, here's Portland. And then we went and found where Russia was. And I said, look how big Russia is. And then I'm like, Ukraine. I showed them where Ukraine was.
Epping described Russia as a bully.
The bully Russia is trying to take the Ukrainians' homes. So they need our help, don't they? I said, the Ukraine, they used their words. They told them no, that the Russia wanted their land.
She spearheaded a fundraiser, specifically a hopathon to help people in Ukraine, and explained to her students that the best way to handle a bully if they don't stop is to try to get away.
We're raising funds for the people that want to get away, for them to have money to go to a safe place.
Salem Kaiser school psychologist Mary Sperling says there are a number of things parents can do.
First of all, I would let children's questions tell you what they need to know. So they may be concerned about things that are different than the things that you're concerned about.
Sperling says, especially for younger kids, avoid unnecessary or frightening details and focus on giving simple information and reassurance.
And make sure to clarify any misconceptions or misinformation, because sometimes children will kind of fill in the details they don't know with very scary things.
Christine Pitawanich, KGW News.
Well, to another story about Oregonians doing their part to help. Right now, there are more than 100 National Guard troops from Oregon in Poland, and they're training alongside other soldiers from around the world. Joe Rainieri with more on their mission.
It's been more than 2 months since these members of the Oregon National Guard have been on U.S. soil.
They definitely are doing different missions within that training, but it's still a training exercise, and they're there to support Poland.
125 members of the 1st Squadron 82nd Cavalry with the Oregon National Guard left for Poland on January 2nd. They're going to be there for a total of 9 months training members of the Polish military.
It's part of what's called Atlantic Resolve, and this is again an ongoing training exercise. I know that their mission sets will obviously change while they're over there.
For nearly 10 years now, the Oregon National Guard has been part of what's called Operation Atlantic Resolve. It's a training program where thousands of troops from around the world are assigned to armored, aviation, and other military exercises.
Our partner nations all working together to just what's called European deterrence, and we're all working together as NATO partners over there.
Bomar told me the crew of Oregonians is doing a variety of missions while in Poland.
It's a 9-month rotation, so we expect them back this fall. At this time, that doesn't look like that's going to change, and then there could potentially be another rotation that goes in. But right now, we're still expecting them home in the fall.
And until they're home, he's still thinking of the men and women over there.
Obviously, we're hoping that they're all safe and continue on this exercise.
Joe Ranieri, KGW News.